But what about the crops? What are we seeing in the fields? And we can get a pretty good assessment of that here over the next few minutes from one of our friends at BASF. It's a company that helps make possible our broadcast every week on This Week in Agribusiness. A.J. Woodyard, come on up here and share some comments with us from that perspective of an agronomist by training. I know you're out in the fields quite a bit. By the way, I had to follow A.J. During the Farm Progress Show. Some FFA members were brought together one morning over there at the show. Oh, here's a photo opportunity, A.J.
Right.
Phyllis, take a good shot here. Look at that, huh? Yeah, who needs a selfie when you've got Phyllis on this thing? But we addressed some FFA members over there at Richland Community College one morning, and I got to follow this guy, and he was just outstanding. And the message that he shared with those young men and women about the possibilities for agriculture. And just wanted to find out a little bit from you what you're seeing in terms of the crops out there, things that we ought to be watching, things producers might want to keep in mind, especially as we look toward 2016.
Well, thanks, Max. And first off, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I feel like with the list of 5 people that my name's on there, I'm like the guy that's number 5 in the rotation and gets cut from the playoff roster. So maybe just a quick something about myself, just because most probably don't know me. I'm actually originally from the Paris, Illinois area, so not too far south of here. And I went to the U of I, got a couple degrees there, and then have been with BSF for about 7 years now. And currently am in a role where I kind of manage some of our agronomic research across the Midwest and do quite a bit of work at a site just west of Champaign at Seymour. So that's just a little bit about myself, and I'm going to kind of start maybe with a bigger picture. I also had the chance to travel and spend quite a bit of time in the fields this summer. I made a midsummer trip down through the Delta region, actually down to southern Georgia to the grower that raised over 500 bushel corn, and swung back up through Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and up into Wisconsin actually on that trip too. And then later in the summer I had the chance to go over to Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and a little bit into Missouri, and it really was a polarizing situation. I mean, you had nothing like what we saw last year where you saw good crops most everywhere you went. Certainly the Eastern Corn Belt, the situation was not very good. Indiana and Ohio, I would agree, was just about as bad as I can remember seeing it.
Did you get to Minnesota?
I did not get a chance to get to Minnesota, but I did travel.
Where's Aunt Marjorie? Eric's aunt. We could ask her about Minnesota. But yes, I was up there, and I'm telling you, standing on the hills and looking down over the fields, it was like looking at a carpet.
Yep.
It was so even, and from what I saw visiting with growers up there too, it's every bit as good as we've been hearing.
Yep. Yeah, and I did get the chance to spend quite a bit of time walking fields in Iowa, and Iowa was good. It wasn't what I would call the Central Illinois good of last year, where a lot of us were looking at yields in the 230 to 260 range. There was a lot of farms that were 200 plus. But I don't think it was quite to that level. So I mean, there definitely was a much different scenario, and I was one of the ones who, when I saw the initial reports, the initial crop reports and yield reports on corn, I thought it was crazy. That they were a little bit high there and that it would come off a little bit. And then if you kind of bring it down regionally now to what we've been seeing as we move in closer to harvest and we start to see the combines begin to roll, some of the early reports that I've gotten in have been typically about 15 to 20% off of what we saw last year, and on corn. And so where we may have been 220 or 230 to 260 last year, now we're hearing a lot of 180 to 220s on as kind of average yield reports. Some places are going to be better than that. There will be farms that will be better than that. There will be farms in this area that are. There will be some that are worse. I've certainly heard reports of 120 to 150 bushel corn. And I guess from what we've seen, I would think of 3 quick things, because I know I'm short on time, from the corn crop side. Number 1, drainage. Drainage was huge this year, and as we all know, we had a lot of rain for us. We had about 9 inches in June. In some places, they had 9 inches in one rain in June at our research site just west of Champaign. But certainly drainage paid, and there are a lot of holes out there. Unlike last year, where we may have only seen a 40 or 50 bushel swing as we went across a field, this year we're going to see everything from zeros to 300 plus. There are a lot of holes out there. Number 2 would be nitrogen, and that I think I piggyback well onto what was just said before. Nitrogen programs, there is a huge diversity in the yields you'll see based on nitrogen. And so not only do I think split applying nitrogen is good from a stewardship standpoint, I think there's real agronomic value to it as well. And we've seen that when you get that many rains in June, especially if you tack on poor drainage, you see a lot of denitrification, you see a lot of leaching. Our nitrate tests showed that throughout the summer this year, and we saw yellow corn as well. And the nice thing are there's new tools being developed and new inhibitors that keep it in the form that we want to keep it in that can help bring value, but I think there is real benefit year over year in that split application of nitrogen. Lastly, this is probably the worst disease year I've ever seen. I spent some time over in western Illinois and eastern Iowa when the corn was about milk to early dough, and I had never seen northern corn leaf blight like I had seen over there. It came in a little bit later here, but we're seeing a lot of it here as well. But in some cases over there were fields that were 50% brown by the time they were in milk to early dough. It just really was devastating. And so I think you're going to see a lot of value, and I've been getting quite a few pictures of where guys have run fungicides to manage disease this year. There will be some big differences. And now we were just out actually doing some push tests, stock push tests to look at stock integrity. So just thinking forward now, what I expect to see, we have about a 70 hybrid trial out this year, and we were out checking the standability potential of some of those different hybrids. And basically what we go out and do is you take your finger and just extend your arm and see almost like a severe wind situation to see how that stock is holding up. And we saw a huge range, and some of it was hybrid related, some of it was application related, but everything from potentially 6 to 8% of those plants that were falling over all the way up to 90%. So we have a real situation where you're going to want to keep track of, especially where you lost nutrients and maybe short on nitrogen. Really pay attention to your stalks at harvest here, because we're seeing tops fall out of this corn in a hurry. You can drive down the road and you can really see the integrity is not there. And I am concerned about any weather events later in the spring really having an issue on the standability.
One thing that's fresh on my mind is what we saw last week in that heat. I mean, it was remarkable, and I think some of you addressed this as we were visiting before the meeting. Remarkable to see the difference in the stalks in just a week's time. Did we lose any test weight, do you think, in that very, very rapid dry down?
Yeah, and yes. I mean, there's certainly what we've seen in some of the early yield reports. We just don't have the kernel depth there and the test weight that we had hoped to see. I mean, for several reasons. I think the nitrogen loss is one of those, and then I think the extreme heat and some of the drier conditions late in the year probably will contribute to that as well. It's amazing though. I really was just like you. I could not believe driving over to Decatur for 3 days last week, and we sweated quite a bit while we were there too, I think. But it was amazing to see how brown the crop went in just a week's time. And in other areas, I had just been in eastern Iowa the week before, and the crop was still green.
Right.
And so pretty amazing what a week of heat did to us.
I made the comment that the field just didn't look right to me in some instances. Maybe I just succumbed to all the heat too. I'm not sure. As you say, with all the disease problems, this should give you a pretty good basis side by side, I would think, of what fungicide would do. I mean, you haven't seen, I guess, yield results yet from your plots, but what are you expecting in the terms of yield differences?
We'll see probably as substantial differences as I probably have seen in my 7 years. Last year we had a similar hybrid trial out where our average yield response was about 12 bushel across 70 hybrids. I think that number will probably be closer to 15 or 20 this year. The number, just the amount of not only northern corn leaf blight and gray leaf spot, but some of the stalk rots as well and crown rot issues that we've had, standability. It's about as significant. The conditions were right. We were cool earlier in the year. We had a lot of rainfall that really drove disease pressure earlier than normal, and it's really continued even throughout the summer.